Why is there a rooster on top of nearly every old church in Europe? Why did the Victorians feel the need to rename this bird? And why does the same creature appear in the myths of cultures that never even met each other, from ancient Greece to North Scandinavia to Persia? The rooster is arguably the most symbolically loaded bird in human history. More than the eagle, more than the dove. This small farmyard bird has somehow become a universal symbol of, well, almost everything. Today, we're tracing how that happened. We're going from Roman insults to Norse apocalypse, from Socrates' dying words to church proclamations. And yes, we are going to talk about why the Victorians got so uncomfortable about this bird's original name. And here's the strange part that's going to run underneath all of this. The rooster, perhaps more than any other animal in history, has been associated with male virility, with masculine potency, which is deeply ironic because roosters don't actually have the equipment. But we'll get to that. Let's start with the word itself. In Old English, going back to at least 890 CE, this bird was called a cock. It's onomatopoeic, meaning to sound like the noise the bird makes. The French have cock. Old Norse had cocker. Everyone agreed this bird says cock. And for centuries, nobody thought twice about it. You had cockerels and weathercocks and haycocks and Hancock and Hitchcock, and absolutely nobody giggled. Then around the 1610s, the word cock started being used as slang for, well, a certain part of the male anatomy. And suddenly you had a problem, at least if you were a certain kind of person. The first written use of the word rooster appears in 1772 in the diary of a 12-year-old girl in Boston named Anna Green Winslow. Rooster from roost, meaning the perch where a bird sleeps. It had been used informally before as roost cock, but the Puritans in America started dropping the cock part entirely. By 1822, when British visitors came to America, they noted rooster as a distinctly American word and thought it was rather prudish. By 1850, the notion that cock was improper for polite company had become widespread in America. And this wasn't an isolated incident. The Victorians, especially American Victorians, went on a euphemism rampage. Bulls became gentleman cows, or cow creatures, or my personal favorite, male cows. Breast meat became bosom. If you wanted a chicken leg at dinner, you asked for the second wing, or simply a limb, because leg was apparently too suggestive of legs. Haycocks became haystacks. Weathercocks became weather vanes. The author Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, her father was born Amos Bronson Alcocks. He changed the family name to Alcott. Meanwhile, back in Britain, people kept saying cock without batting an eyelid. They still do. It's a chicken. They have cockerels and cock-a-doodle-doo and nobody faints. To this day, rooster is primarily an American, Australian and New Zealand word. The British think it sounds a bit prim. Now here's the thing that makes all of this so wonderfully absurd. The rooster, this bird that became so associated with male anatomy that people couldn't even say its name, doesn't actually have that anatomy. Chickens reproduce through what's delicately called a cloacal kiss. Both the rooster and the hen have a cloaca, a single opening for digestive and reproductive systems. During mating, the rooster balances on the hen's back, they touch cloacas briefly, sperm is transferred, and that's it. No penetration. The whole thing takes about 3 seconds. Roosters are one of the majority of bird species that lack the external reproductive organs that mammals and a small handful of birds have. Ducks do have them. Geese have them, but roosters, nothing. The most symbolically masculine bird in human history doesn't actually have one. So the Victorians renamed a bird to avoid association with an organ that the bird doesn't possess. And with that firmly in mind, let's go back to when roosters meant something rather more serious. It's around 480 BCE. Athens is facing annihilation. The Persian Empire under Xerxes has assembled one of the largest invasion forces the ancient world has ever seen. They've already crushed the Spartans at Thermopylae, yes, the 300, great movie, and they're marching towards Athens. The city has been evacuated. Everything the Athenians have built, everything that they are, is about to be burned. The Athenian general Themistocles is trying to hold together a Greek fleet that's outnumbered and outmatched. His men are terrified, and according to ancient sources, on the eve of battle, he gathered his troops and showed them something. 2 roosters fighting. Some accounts say he found them by the roadside. Others say he staged the fight deliberately. Either way, he made his soldiers watch these 2 birds go at each other with everything they had. And then he said something to the effect of, "These birds fight not for their gods, not for their ancestors' monuments, not for glory or freedom or their children. They fight simply because neither will yield to the other. How much more then should you fight, you who fight for all of these things?" The Greeks went on to win the Battle of Salamis. It was one of the most decisive naval victories in history. The Persian fleet was shattered. The invasion was broken. Western civilization, as we know it, was arguably saved by 2 fighting chickens. Now here's what happened next, and I think it's extraordinary. The Athenians were so struck by this moment that they institutionalized it. Annual public cockfights were instituted in Athens, and they weren't held in some back alley. They were held in the Theatre of Dionysus, the same venue where Greek tragedy was invented, where Athenian democracy performed itself for its citizens. The ancient writer Lucian tells us that attendance at these cockfights was compulsory for young Athenian men. This wasn't entertainment, it was civic education. They called it improving the seeds of valor in the minds of their youth. Before you became a soldier, before you could vote, before you were considered a full citizen, you watched roosters fight. You were expected to learn something about courage from birds that weigh only a few kilograms. This martial symbolism ran deep. The rooster was sacred to Ares, the god of war. He was depicted with roosters on shields and temple offerings. It was sacred to Apollo, announcing the sun. It was depicted with Hermes, the messenger god who guided souls to the underworld. The virtues the Greeks saw in the rooster weren't complicated. Courage that doesn't calculate the odds, vigilance that never sleeps through danger, pride that refuses to yield, and a willingness to announce yourself, to crow, regardless of what's coming. This martial association persisted. The Romans adopted it, connecting the rooster with Mars. France still uses the Gallic rooster as a national symbol, which actually started as a Roman insult. Gallus in Latin means both rooster and inhabitant of Gaul. The Romans were calling the French arrogant chickens. The French eventually decided to own it. But Greece wasn't the only ancient culture that looked at the rooster and saw something cosmic. Greek mythology has an origin story for why roosters crow at dawn, and it involves adultery, humiliation, and divine punishment. Ares, the god of war, was having an affair with Aphrodite, goddess of love, who happened to be married to Hephaestus, the smith god. To avoid getting caught, Ares posted a young soldier named Electrian at the door with one job: watch for the sunrise, because Helios, the sun god, sees everything, and he'd definitely tell Hephaestus. Electrian fell asleep. Helios saw the lovers. Hephaestus found out. It was a whole thing involving an unbreakable net and all the gods coming to laugh at Ares tangled up with his mistress. Ares was furious, and he took his anger out on the soldier who'd failed him. He transformed Electrian into a rooster, doomed forever to announce the sunrise he once failed to watch for. Every dawn for all eternity, the rooster crows because once a soldier fell asleep at his post. And the Greek word for rooster? Electrian. Speaking of Greece, one of the most famous last words in philosophy involves a chicken. It's 399 BCE. Socrates has been condemned to death for corrupting the youth of Athens and disrespecting the gods. He's surrounded by his students. He drinks the hemlock, and as the poison begins to take effect, he says, "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Please don't forget to pay the debt." And then he died. Now, Asclepius was the god of healing and medicine. People traditionally sacrificed a rooster to him after recovering from an illness, a thank you offering for being cured. Scholars have been arguing about what Socrates meant for 2,400 years. The standard interpretation is that Socrates was thanking Asclepius for the cure of death, that life itself was the disease and dying was recovery. Nietzsche took this as proof that Socrates secretly hated existence. Others argue he was simply being practical. Maybe someone in his household had been sick and they genuinely owed the temple a chicken. Either way, one of history's greatest philosophers spent his dying breath talking about poultry. Now let's go north, way north, to people who never met the Greeks, never heard their myths, and had a completely different set of gods. In Norse mythology, when the world ends, it doesn't begin with a bang or a whimper. It begins with 3 roosters crowing. The first is Gullinkambi, Golden Comb, a rooster who lives in Valhalla, the hall of the slain warriors. When he crows, he wakes Odin and all the gods, and he rouses the Einherjar, the chosen dead who've been training for this moment since they fell in battle. The second is Fjalar, the deceiver, a crimson-red rooster who lives in a forest in Jotunheim, the land of giants. When he crows, he alerts the giants that the final battle is coming. The third rooster has no name. He's described only as soot red, and he lives in the halls of hell, the realm of the dishonored dead. When he crows, he raises the dead who didn't earn their place in Valhalla. 3 roosters, 3 crows, and then Fenrir the wolf breaks free, and Jormungandr, the world serpent, rises from the sea. The gods march out to meet their doom. The Vikings, these warriors who valued courage above almost all else, believed the end of everything would be announced by chickens. And then there's Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest religions, founded in ancient Persia somewhere between 1500 and 1000 BCE. In Zoroastrian belief, the rooster is sacred to Shrosha, a divine being whose name means conscience or observance. Shrosha guards the Shinvat Bridge, which is the bridge that souls must cross after death to reach either paradise or punishment. But here's what I find remarkable. Zoroastrians believed the rooster's crow didn't just announce the dawn, it caused it. Or rather, the crow actively drove away the demons and evil spirits that roamed during the night. Every single morning, when your rooster crows, he's doing battle with darkness. The prophet Zoroaster himself called the rooster the wonderful creation of wise Lord Ahura Mazda. So here we have Greece, Persia, Scandinavia, cultures separated by thousands of miles, with different languages, different gods, different world views, and all of them looked at the rooster and saw the same thing: the announcer of transitions, the guardian between darkness and light, the bird that crows at the boundary between one world and the next. Which brings us back to those church steeples. The story that put the rooster on Christian churches comes from all 4 of the Gospels, which means it was important enough that nobody wanted to leave it out. It's the night before Jesus' crucifixion. He's having the Last Supper with his disciples, and he tells Peter, his most devoted follower, the rock on which he'll build his church, that before the rooster crows, Peter will deny knowing him 3 times. Peter protests. He would never. He'd die first. Hours later, Jesus has been arrested. Peter is in the courtyard, and 3 different people ask if he's one of Jesus' followers. 3 times, Peter says no. He doesn't know the man. He's never met him. And then the rooster crows. And Peter, realizing what he's done, goes out and weeps. The rooster in this story is a witness to human weakness, but it's also, crucially, a witness to the possibility of redemption, because Peter goes on to become the foundation of the Christian church. He failed, he wept, and he was forgiven. Pope Gregory I, around 590 CE, declared the rooster the most suitable emblem of Christianity. And in the 9th century, Pope Nicholas I decreed that a rooster should be placed on top of every church steeple as a reminder of Peter's denial and as a symbol of spiritual vigilance. The oldest surviving rooster weather vane dates to 820 CE, and from then on, the weathercock became one of the most visible symbols in Christian Europe. When Notre Dame burned in 2019, one of the things that miraculously survived was the cathedral's rooster weather vane. It fell from the spire, but was found in the rubble, battered but intact. Inside it were sacred relics, a fragment of the crown of thorns and relics of Saint Denis and Saint Genevieve. They'd been tucked inside the rooster to spiritually protect the cathedral. The rooster, it seems, kept them safe. When medieval Christians put roosters on their churches, they may not have known about Zoroaster or Ragnarök, but they were drawing on the same instinct that those older cultures had. The rooster announces dawn, the daily triumph of light over darkness, which maps perfectly onto Christ's resurrection. It calls the faithful to prayer. It watches from the highest point, vigilant. It's practical too, telling you which way the wind blows, which for farming communities was genuinely important. And it's up there, visible for miles, crowing silently across the centuries. Every culture that kept chickens looked at the rooster and saw something essential about existence itself. Not the hen who feeds you, who gives you eggs, who is, let's be honest, considerably more useful. No, it was the rooster, the one who does nothing but crow and fight and strut around like he owns the place. But maybe that's exactly why. The rooster announces he refuses to let the world sleep through transitions. Every single morning, regardless of what happened yesterday, regardless of who's listening, regardless of the odds, he declares that the world begins again. He doesn't wait for perfect conditions. He doesn't need an audience, although he appreciates one. He stands up in the cold and the dark and crows anyway. The Greeks saw it, the Vikings saw it, the church saw it, and now, maybe, we can see it too. Every time we look up at an old church steeple or hear that crow at first light,